It is 22 March, Sunday. I'm Charlie Garrett, and this is the CG Prophecy Report. Lipstick and hedgehogs. That and a lot of other things to go over on today's report. How do those two go together? Anybody? Well, we're going to find out, aren't we? Got some news from Israel today, from the Times of Israel. Israel has surpassed the UK as the 7th largest global arms exporter, report shows. Now, this is a country of not many people, about the size of a sliver of cheese, compared to a giant buffet, and they're the 7th largest global arms exporter. I mean, the Lord has planned this so well. I'll say this before I go on. Somebody did the probability based on statistics of the chances of Israel, the people, being back in the land according to the Bible, the way it's laid out in the Bible. And I may have this number wrong, but I think it was 6 trillion to 1. So, people that deny what's going on in the world are it's like people that deny that there's a God that created everything. The chances are just impossible. And yet, there they are, just the way the Bible said. Okay, so from the Times of Israel, Israel is now the world's 7th largest arms exporter and for the first time has surpassed Great Britain in weapons exports. Britain's share of global exports currently stands at 3.4%. Following the United States, the largest arms exporters are France at 9.8, Russia at 6.8, Germany at 5.7, China at 5.6, Italy at 5.1, and then Israel at 4.4. Israel is also the 14th largest arms importer in the world. Most of its imported weaponry is purchased from the U.S., which is 68% of what they buy, followed by anybody? An obvious one, Germany. They've got great relations with Germany because of the Holocaust. They bear that burden and they continue to side with Israel on most issues, with a small fraction coming from Italy. The total volume of global arms trade rose by 9.2% in 2021 through 2025 compared to 2016 to 2020. European nations more than tripled their weapons imports, effectively becoming the world's largest arms importing region. The U.S. was the world's largest arms exporter in 21 through 25, commanding a 42% share of all global arms exports, putting it far ahead of the runner-up countries. Its share of total arms exports increased compared to 2016 to 2020 period when it stood at 36%. So we're going up in our exports. When discussing the destination countries for U.S. arms exports, the report's authors note that a blackout has been imposed on the exact quantity of weapons the U.S. sold to the Ukraine in recent years. It's not just weapons that we sold them. We gave them billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, and they're still at a stalemate how many years later. However, assessments suggest that U.S. President Donald Trump's administration scaled back arms sales to Ukraine compared to former President Joe Biden's administration. From Disclosed TV, Boeing wins $289 million Israel contract for 5,000 smart bombs. Boeing has secured a $298 million contract for these bombs, small diameter bombs, guided munitions launched from Israeli jets. Deliveries are not expected to begin for 36 months and are unrelated to ongoing U.S. and Israeli strikes in Iran. This sale follows Israel's earlier request for 2166 bombs, which the State Department acknowledged in February 2025. Boeing had previously dispatched about 1,000 bombs to Israel after the October 7, 2023 Hamas attacks. The deal is a direct commercial sale, not a formal foreign military sale. It was not included in recent State Department release concerning another sale of BLU-110 bomb casings. So Israel's using bombs as fast as any country on the planet right now. I don't know. They're probably doing it more than we are. They're really, really taking care of the situation. They had a bombing again yesterday. People died. That tells me that Israel does not sit back when they are bombed and they lose people. They go in and they attack. So they are going to go in and do more attacking probably within the next few hours. We just got to wait and see. They may plan something and do a little more devastation in a day or so. But whatever they're going to do, they're not going to let that go unresponded to. Zero Hedge, Israel slamming GOP candidate dominates the youth vote in Florida. Yes, for the governor. In the latest indication of a sea change in U.S. politics, a Republican Florida gubernatorial candidate who's made opposition to U.S. support of Israel a cornerstone of his campaign is winning the young GOP vote by a wide margin. Combining social media savvy with oratorical flair, the Georgetown dropout turned investor and hedge fund manager is likely to continue making gains in his long-shot drive to succeed term-limited Ron DeSantis. Whatever the final tally, however, his domination of the youth vote may portend the end of the GOP's role as a bastion of support for Israel. This is what's important. Even if he doesn't win, he is getting the youth convinced that Israel is the enemy, okay? Chasing Trump-endorsed frontrunner Brian Donalds, James Fishback has only reached mid-single digits among the broad GOP electorate, so he doesn't really stand a chance at this point. However, among 18 to 34-year-olds, Fishback trounces Donald's pick 32% to 8%, so the young people are sold out to this guy. Fishback's pointed rhetoric about the support for the state of Israel marks his campaign as a watershed in U.S. politics because it's coming from the mouth of a Republican and is clearly resonating with young conservatives. His statements have only grown more pointed with the launch of the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. As long as this war continues, it's going to continue along that line. It may get worse. Got some news from Christianity, from the Christian Post. Antisemitism is growing in the church. Something has gone wrong. Now, I don't agree with everything this guy said. He's just analyzing the state of anti-Semitism among believers here in the U.S., and some of the things I don't agree with. But here we go. 91% of American Jews say they feel less safe in the U.S. because of violent anti-Semitic attacks in the past year. 86% say anti-Semitism has increased since the Hamas terrorist attacks on October 7th. Well, of course it has. Nearly one-third say they have personally been targeted by anti-Semitism online or in person within the last year. But statistics alone cannot explain what is happening inside the American church. When contempt for Jewish people shows up among Christians, it exposes a theological problem before it exposes a political one. That's absolutely correct. The harshest words I heard in Israel didn't come from terrorists. They came from Christians. My wife and I traveled to Israel for the first time this past December. We walked through Jerusalem, stood at the empty tomb, visited a Nova massacre site, met families who lost children on October 7th. I wept for the families of fallen soldiers. We sat with former hostages and with parents whose sons and daughters never came home. Then I posted a simple photo of myself standing beside the Israeli flag. Within minutes, my comments and inbox were filled with something I did not expect. Anger. Not political debate, not disagreement, something darker. The attacks didn't come from secular critics. They came from self-described Bible-believing Christians. One ministry leader messaged me publicly, "You are an idiot." A woman commented, "If the Jews hadn't found Christ in 2,000 years, then we are the new chosen people." I was stunned. I was raised in a family that believed Christians should honor the people through whom scriptures came. But what I witnessed online suggested something has shifted. Jesus did not distance himself from Israel's scriptures. He embodied them. The Apostle Paul warned Gentile believers in Romans 11 not to become arrogant toward the Jewish people. He used the image of an olive tree. Gentile believers, he said, are grafted in. We do not replace the root. We share in its nourishment. But instead of gratitude and reverence, some believers show arrogance. When the Old Testament is neglected, that humility disappears. Without the covenant with Abraham, Israel becomes irrelevant. It depends on what covenant you're talking about there. You got to be careful with that because the covenant with Abraham was based on faith in Genesis 15:6. Israel has not exercised faith yet in the Messiah. So he's wrong about that. He's mixing things up and he's coming to an erroneous conclusion in a couple of areas. Without the prophets, exile is misread as rejection. Well, exile is rejection. He explicitly says it. That's why they are exiled. It doesn't mean it's permanent rejection, though, and he's got to get these boxes right. Without Romans 9 through 11, Gentile believers forgot that they were grafted into a story that began long before them. The result is subtle but dangerous. Loving the Jewish people does not require blind allegiance to any government. Political policies can be debated, military decisions can be scrutinized, but contempt for the Jewish people is incompatible with Christian faith. You could say that about anybody. It is incompatible to be contemptible towards Muslims or to Buddhists or to anybody else. He's lumping the Jews into one category and he's putting them aside from the rest of the world. And the gospel doesn't do that. Every person needs Jesus, Jew and Gentile alike. The nation of Israel, as God's covenant people, need Jesus. And when they call on him, he will return to them. But he's got his boxes mixed up, and you can't do that with theology. If your theology produces disdain for the people through whom God gave the law, the prophets, and ultimately the Messiah, something is broken. These are not abstractions. They are the living descendants of the people who preserve the scriptures Christians claim to cherish. Now, that's only true to a point, because they preserved the Old Testament scriptures that pointed to Jesus. They did not preserve the New Testament scriptures which tell of Jesus. So he's once again mixing up his thinking, and he's saying everything is Jewish here. It's not all Jewish, even if they were written by mostly Jews. Luke was not a Jew. Luke was a Gentile. These were preserved by the church. Israel will someday realize that, and they will accept that Jesus is the Messiah by going to Scripture. That's going to happen, but he needs to think through what he is saying, because he is actually doing a disservice at the same time as trying to help the Jewish people by saying the things the way that he is saying it. We've got to be careful with that. The antidote to anti-Semitism is not political tribalism. I'd agree with that. It is biblical literacy. It is remembering that Christianity did not begin in Rome or Washington. It began in Jerusalem. Once again, that is true, but it expanded beyond Jerusalem. Jerusalem today, if you read Galatians 4, I believe it is, where he gives the analogy of Jerusalem of today is in bondage, pictured by Hagar, the slave of Abraham. The church that is above is free, pictured by Sarah. So he's completely mixed up his theology. He's got the right premise, but he has incorrectly handled it, and that is damaging. So there you go. Much more involved in that, much more involved in it. But the Jewish people, like any other people on this planet, need evangelism. They need evangelism. Got some news from the Mideast and Africa today. Fortune magazine. Iran's attack on Amazon data centers in the UAE and Bahrain signal a new kind of war as AI plays an increasingly strategic role, analysts say. The tech industry often talks about the cloud as though it were something abstract and untouchable. But the cloud runs on data centers. Those data centers have an address, and that address can be hit by a drone. 3 data centers operated by AWS, 2 in the UAE and 1 in Bahrain, were struck by Iranian drones or missiles. The attacks forced the facilities offline and led to service outages affecting banking, payment, delivery applications, and enterprise software across the region. U.S. military also uses AWS to run some of its workloads, including running Anthropic's AI model Claude for some intelligence functions. Well, that's being worked out of the government now because they wanted to control the government's use of Anthropic. And as one guy said, you've got some liberal blue-haired kids running the nation's intel. You can't have that. So Trump said they are no longer in it. So that'll be taken out soon enough. I think he gave him 60 days to be out of the government. Anyway, Iran's Fars news agency said that Bahrain facility had been deliberately targeted to identify the role of these centers in supporting the enemy's military and intelligence activities. AWS has declined to comment on the Iranian claim, and it is not known whether the attacks impacted U.S. military computing workloads. Still, the attack is believed to be the first time data centers have been deliberately targeted for airstrikes in a conflict. Experts say it almost certainly won't be the last. Data centers are rapidly emerging as vital strategic assets and vulnerable targets. The boundary between commercial cloud computing and military operations has largely vanished. The Pentagon's Joint Warfighting Cloud capability and its joint all-domain command and control networks run on the same commercial infrastructure that serves banks and ride-hailing applications. Meanwhile, Several new organizations have reported that the U.S. military uses Anthropic's AI model, Claude, which runs on AWS, for intelligence assessments, target identification, and battle simulations during the Iran strikes. That dual-use reality means that attacks on commercial data centers can have immediate military consequences and vice versa. If data centers become critical hubs for transiting military information, which they're very quickly doing that, we can expect them to be increasingly targeted by both cyber and physical attacks. Data centers have long made some efforts at physical security, but most of these security measures, high fences topped with barbed wire, carefully controlled access, and security cameras, are aimed at preventing espionage or sabotage by a person on the ground, not aerial attacks. Data centers are sprawling, visible complexes dependent on exposed infrastructure such as cooling units, diesel generators, and gas turbines that can be disabled without a direct hit on the server halls themselves. If you knock out some of the chillers, you can take them fully offline. And the problem extends beyond the data centers themselves. 17 submarine cables pass through the Red Sea, carrying the majority of data between Europe, Asia, and Africa. With Iran's closure of the Strait of Hormuz and renewed Houthi threats in the Red Sea, both critical data choke points are now in active conflict zones simultaneously. Closing both choke points simultaneously would be a globally disruptive event. The strikes on the UAE and Bahrain data centers land at an especially fraught moment for the Gulf's ambitions to become a global hub for artificial intelligence. It's an important article. That's the only one I've seen on this issue. Very important. Zero Hedge, UK government urges schools to snitch on anti-Muslim hostility in Orwellian crackdown. Somebody doesn't want to worship with a Muslim, you can now expect that your child's going to be snitched on in school. Breitbart, UN Chief Guterres to fast with Muslims in strict Ramadan observance. What kind of an image is he portraying for the world right now with Ramadan going on? Breitbart, UN Chief Guterres releases video urging world to embrace Islam's noble Ramadan. Can you imagine him saying that? Why doesn't he say, why don't we embrace Christianity's noble, forgive your neighbor of his trespasses and, whatever. It'll never happen, but there's a problem in the UN, and we need to be out of there. With this type of thinking, we need to be out of the UN. Mongolia, because we're on short mode today, I just have a title for you, ANN. Mongolia considers law restricting social media registration for minors under 16. So if you want to read the article, there you go. Daniel 12 Technology today, Zero Hedge. With world seemingly at war, DARPA finds time to unveil the X-76. This is just great. I've been waiting for the X-76 since I was this big, 1976. I'm kidding. DARPA said the new aircraft called the X-76 and being built by Bell Textron is designed to solve one of military aviation's biggest trade-offs, combining airplane-like speed with helicopter-like runway independence. The program, run jointly with USSOC, aims to produce an aircraft that can cruise above 400 knots, hover in austere environments, and operate from unprepared surfaces. You no longer need runways. That's the problem. That's a limiting factor around the world, too. DARPA said, as we see with the UK not wanting us to use their runways in Diego Garcia until the battle is won, and then all of a sudden it's okay for us to use them. DARPA said the X-76 has passed the critical design review, and the program is moving into manufacturing, integration, assembly, and ground testing. For too long, the runway has been both an enabler and a tether, granting speed but creating a critical vulnerability. With Sprint, we're not just building an X-plane, we're building options. We're working to deliver the option of surprise, the option of rapid reinforcement, and the option of life-saving speed anywhere on the globe without needing any runway. Brilliant. Okay, it's a dangerous world, including the inevitable plagues noted in the Book of Revelation. From health.us Davis. A little-known respiratory virus, human metapneumovirus, surging in Northern California. The virus was first discovered in 2001, but is less well known than its viral relative, RSV. HMPV is seasonal, like the annual flu. Here's how they know they found this. Wastewater scan data. They test wastewater for everything. I mean, they test it for heavy metals, and they test it for chlorine. They test it for everything. They also test it for viruses and stuff, which tracks pathogens in wastewater. Also shows high levels of HMPV in Northern California, including Sacramento, Davis, Vallejo, and San Francisco. From Fox, Florida drought deepens strain on citrus industry as growers battle costs and disease. Our citrus industry is just disappearing. But as I said, I think it was last week, I planted 4 citrus at my house because the flood killed everything, and they're already having the blossoms are turning into little limes and tangelos, and we're all excited, man. You walk outside and it smells like heaven. First thing she said when she woke up this morning, "It smells so good out there." Oh, okay. According to the U.S. Drought Monitor, 100% of the state, 100% of Florida is experiencing some level of drought, with more than 75% in extreme drought conditions. We did get a little rain this past week. The dry spell is adding new financial strain for growers who rely heavily on irrigation to sustain crops. Florida accounts for 17% of the nation's citrus production. For many communities, the industry remains a key economic driver. However, nature has been anything but dependable for Florida farmers. Back in 2000, the state's citrus industry covered over 800,000 acres. Today, that figure has fallen to just over 200,000. So we are taking a hit there. The number one challenge the industry has had over the years is citrus greening disease. And then on top of that challenge, we've experienced numerous hurricanes. What was it? Irma went right up the state, and it just devastated the citrus industry. That was terrible. I think that was 2018. Morality. The post-millennial 17 blue states sue the Trump admin over policy requiring colleges to prove their emissions policies aren't racist. In other words, their emissions policies are racist. President Trump ordered the policy amid concerns that colleges were using personal statements and other parts of the application process to indirectly factor race into admissions decisions. From Fox, New Jersey Senate votes 38-0 to require free menstrual products at public colleges under the Menstrual Equity Bill. 38-0. Not one person in that state said, "I don't agree with this." Life News. Indiana judge rules their religious right to kill babies in abortions. You can now say, "I'm religiously inclined to kill a child," and in Indiana, that's okay. Zero Hedge feminist monster film The Bride is the biggest box office bomb of 2026. Good. From the Post-Millennial, Seattle may delay transportation projects to pay for anti-ice signs ordered by socialist Mayor Katie Wilson.
Wow.
Yeah, that's more important than fixing your roads. Breitbart, Wyoming governor signs bill restricting abortion once fetal heartbeat is detected. It's a step. Good job, buddy. From Fox, Trump admin pulls $120,000 in grants for research on LGBTQ cartoonists and multi-ethnic studies. $120,000. Breitbart, Democrat bill to decriminalize prostitution dies amid opposition and lack of support. I thought it would pass, but it did not. I mentioned it a week or two ago. It died. They're not going to legalize prostitution in Colorado. Good news. Yep. Some other news from Breitbart. British government plan to scrap jury trials clears the first hurdle despite opposition. Yeah, not all of them, but they're scrapping these. Why? You'll hear in this and you'll say, well, why don't they just fix the issue? But they won't. The left-wing government's plans to scrap jury trials for most cases in Britain cleared a major hurdle as MPs backed legislation to advance it to the next stage of the lawmaking process. The proposition legislation would end the right to be judged by a jury of your peers for cases in which the defendant is facing 3 years or less in prison. So anybody with that time, you don't get a jury. You would think that's a good thing, but it's only because of certain groups of people. Instead, the fate of the accused would be decided by a single judge. Lammy claimed that if his changes are not implemented, the already record 80,000 case backlog will balloon to upwards of 200,000 by 2035. To restore swift and fair justice, we are pulling every lever available. Investment is essential, modernization is essential, and reform. So they want all of these people that are committing these deplorable crimes to be given a pass so that they are just out again. You know who I'm talking about. I don't even need to say it. I've been reporting on it for years now. There is a problem in the UK, and it is only going to become like LA pretty soon, where they just let them in, let them out, let them in, let them out. The police will be wasting their time even arresting people. Express. NATO country slammed as Armed Forces bill raises military reserve age to 65. Yes, once again, the UK. The government intends to raise the age at which the Army's strategic reserve, this is their strategic reserve, all of you guys will qualify, strategic reserve, the nation's pool of retired soldiers, can be called upon from 55 to 65, which I fall into that, so I'd be strategic reserve in the UK right now. Imagine that. Charlie serving once again. The new measures are being introduced as part of a new bill which will make it easier to mobilize tens of thousands of former military personnel if World War III breaks out. It is, in effect, political signaling that fails to confront the deep-rooted issues undermining our ability to recruit and retain a credible fighting force. The Army is contracted to its smallest size in more than 200 years, with just over 70,000 full-time, fully trained troops ready to deploy to the front line, raising alarm among experts amid escalating tensions as war rages in Europe and the Middle East. Mail Online. As war rages in Iran, woke Ministry of Defense, once again the UK, asked troops, we got a war going on, we got no people to fight our battles. He asked the troops, guys, do you literally, his quote, guys, do you want to wear makeup and nail polish? Army chiefs have been criticized for launching a review into whether male soldiers can wear makeup, which would do me good, I suppose. But while British personnel in Cyprus called for more protection and HMS Dragon was stuck in port, all serving soldiers were asked whether they thought men could apply cosmetics and wear their hair like women. They were surveyed on woke gender-free changes, which could see men wearing makeup with long hair or hair extensions, painted nails, and earrings. The consultation asked soldiers if they agree rules on makeup should be gender-free. Explaining this means that men, women, and non-binary service personnel can all wear makeup in the same way.
Corporal Klinger.
Yeah. Corporal Klinger. You get out into the fighting, and the guy, all he has to do is grab your earring, pull it out, and you're going to lose your advantage. Zero hedge. They're replacing Winston Churchill with a hedgehog. The Bank of England announced plans to scrub Churchill and other iconic British figures from the nation's banknotes, swapping them out for images of wildlife like hedgehogs, badgers, and otters. Conservatives and history defenders are fuming, labeling the decision a cowardly capitulation to woke sensitivities that deem giants like Churchill too divisive. Current notes feature Churchill on the 5-pound, Jane Austen on the 10-pound, J.M.W. Turner on the 20-pound, and Alan Turing on the 50-pound. All will be phased out in favor of native species, plants, and landscapes, albeit with King Charles III remaining on the front. So there you go. That's the UK in a nutshell. In 1 week. Zero hedge. Coffee King Howard Schultz. He's a real liberal from Seattle, and he's still a liberal, and he'll vote that way, but he flees to Florida hours after Washington wealth tax passes the House. Florida Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz, a huge liberal himself, announces he's moving from Washington to Miami hours after the state lawmakers advanced a tax bill targeting residents that earn over $1 million per year. Now, he's not smart enough to figure this out. I'm being taxed to death by Democrats, and yet I'm going to move to a place that's conservative and vote Democrat. These are not intelligent people. From the Gateway Pundit, Yamaha announces it's leaving California for Georgia after 50 years as Californians debate implementing a wealth tax. Yamaha Motors Corporation. Yamaha. I better not sing it. If I do, then we'll get a violation of some copyright or something. But I grew up with that song in my head. Yamaha Motors Corporation has been in Orange County for almost 50 years, but has announced that they are leaving the state for greener pastures in Georgia. This is going to hurt Governor Newsom, who has a lot of success chasing out hundreds to thousands of businesses or subsidiaries, which fled to business-friendly red states, including Jelly Belly, Chevron, X-Twitter, SpaceX, Oracle, Hewlett-Packard, Charles Schwab, and Toyota Motor North America. They're just leaving in the droves, and they can't figure this out. After 77 years in California, In-N-Out moved its headquarters to Tennessee, and Valero is closing its refinery. Marathon Petroleum is warning they could leave as well, and they just keep doing it. These are not intelligent people. This is bad fruit on the tree. Fox, Trump touts historic $300 billion Texas refinery as the first new U.S. plant in nearly 50 years. Good job, Trump. Situated in a massive deepwater foreign trade zone, the project will leverage advanced infrastructure and strategic rail and sea connections to transport low-carbon fuels and other energy products. AFR said the refinery will generate thousands of construction and permanent jobs, while offering wages that exceed market averages. Partners in India and their largest privately held energy company, Reliance, made a tremendous investment in the project, according to Trump. AFR also signed a binding 20-year offtake term sheet with the global super major. The company plans to formally break ground on the new refinery in Q2 2026, which starts in a couple days. So good job there. Before I go on, I saw something last night. I was watching something about Guinness Stout. And it is not brown beer. You look at it, it's brown or whatever. It looks almost black. It's not. Do you know what color it is? It's ruby red. They shine a light through it, and you'll see that if you hold it up to light. Now, having said that, the reason why I thought it was interesting, because I like how it's made, that program, they tell you how things are made. The guy that started that, it was in a depressed economy, and they gave him a 5,000-year lease at 46 pounds a year for a giant warehouse, and they're still paying 46 pounds a week, or a month, I'm sorry, all these years later, hundreds of years later, because the guy signed this contract, 5,000-year contract, forever, right? Well, this guy here, I hope they got a contract like that, and they can live in Texas forever and ever for today's cost. They probably didn't do that, though. Anyway, Zero Hedge, it's ruby red. You had no idea. Anyway, Zero Hedge, Moody's cuts New York City's rating outlook despite Mondami protests. He can protest all he wants. He's going to run the place into the ground. Yep. I've seen 3 articles this week that would make you flip your head at the policies this guy is coming up with. Yep. He is literally, I really believe he's literally crazy. He's, man.
Be a Democrat.
Well, yeah, that he is. Okay, we got who said this? Now, you're not going to get it, but it's cool, so I put it in here. You might guess like the general tenor of it, but who said it? The horse is here to stay, but the automobile is only a novelty, a fad. Well, no, but it was somebody that was working with Ford, the president of the Michigan Savings Bank, advising Ford's lawyer not to invest in the Ford Motor Company in 1903. Wow. That was not a smart banker there. No. Okay, I got a less Rick here for you. Buy less. UK says they'd like to be woke, all the while Winston's nothing but smoke. The whole thing really sucks. I hate that word, but anyway, the whole thing really sucks. They want nature on bucks. The way they treat leaders, a joke. Yes. Okay, I got 2 ironies, and we're done early. For the people that are watching this, the reason why we're being done early is because we are doing a very long sermon, finishing up the series on David and Goliath. If you have not watched the first 4, you should watch them and find out what this is picturing in redemptive history. It is unbelievable. Here we go. Irony. Gateway Pundit. Leftists rally in U.S. streets for Iran's brutal regime, while IRGC lawmaker threatens to kill domestic protesters. Shoot on sight issue has been ordered. That's irony. And then this one, this may be the most ever ever. I mean, the gall of this guy. This is just last week he said this. Zero Hedge. Joe Biden makes the insane claim that he reduced illegal immigration.
What an idiot.
Such is the world in which we live. So from Sarasota, Florida to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, I'm Charlie Garrett, and that is your CG Prophecy Report for the week.